There's definitely a lot of evidence suggesting that testosterone levels are dropping and sperm levels are dropping as well. I mean, you've probably heard that very famous statistic globally about, it's over the last few decades, men are making, 50% less sperm. So, and that's obviously very intimately related to testosterone as well. Yeah, it's definitely a problem. And the question is, why is it a problem? And, I know that's something that I've been interested in. Many people are interested. Obviously, a lot of men are interested in this as well. But there's a lot of changes in our environment that have happened over these few decades as well, right? I mean, we've got a lot more chemicals that we've been exposed to. We're eating food. We're not as connected to our food anymore. So foods are a lot more processed and packaged. And, there have been at least one study that I know about showing that if you take healthy young men and you give them like a large bolus, like 80 grams or something of sugar, it drops their testosterone levels by 25%. And this is like pretty immediate. Now, that's a lot of sugar, but it's like a donut and, Coke or something. I mean, people eat that stuff all the time in a day, day after day. And, that's just kind of one example. But I think the larger problem here does have to do with a lot of the chemicals that we're ingesting on a daily basis and aren't even aware of it, right? So these chemicals, I mean, we were having this conversation a minute ago when you guys were pouring your water in your glass, plastic
We're about
bottle.
to get it telling off.
Yeah.
We have a lot of chemicals that are in our environment that we're ingesting that we don't know about. And these chemicals are often associated with plastic. So they're plastic associated chemicals. And they're what are called endocrine-disrupting chemicals, EDCs. These are things like bisphenol A, BPA, or bisphenol S. It's kind of related cousin, BPS. And they're in a lot of plastics. They're in plastic water bottles. They're in the recyclable, reusable water bottles. They're in aluminum cans that have sparkling water or soda. They're lining canned foods. Anything that's in a can, aluminum can, is lined with the plastic lining that has this BPA. They're in to-go coffee mugs. So those coffee mugs that you're getting at your Starbucks or your local bougie, coffee joint, they're also lined with plastic that has BPA or BPS. And, these chemicals leach into the beverage. In the case of heating them, it's even worse. So there have been studies that have shown if you add boiling water to this BPA chemical, it increases the leaching by 55-fold into the water. So that's your to-go coffee or to-go tea that everyone's drinking, walking around drinking, is literally like you're getting these plastic chemicals, and you're also getting pieces of plastic as well. We can talk about later. But BPA and BPS are endocrine-disrupting hormones. And so essentially what that means is they're disrupting our fundamental sex hormones like testosterone, like estrogen. And they do it by a variety of different ways. You've probably heard of this xenoestrogens. So BPA is known as a xenoestrogen. It's an estrogen mimetic. And the reason it's referred to that is because it binds to the estrogen receptor. And the estrogen receptor thinks it's estrogen. So it kind of confuses things, and maybe your body will stop making the estrogen. So they also bind to androgen receptors, which bind to testosterone and other androgens, and they do the same thing. So essentially what happens is, you'll have these chemicals binding to the receptors, and your body thinks, oh, I have enough testosterone around, I don't need to make more. When really it wasn't testosterone binding to that androgen receptor, it was the BPA. And this is why you can find studies that have shown everywhere from early development to adolescence to adulthood, BPA and BPS to a lesser extent, only because BPS has replaced BPA. So there's fewer studies out there just looking at its effects on testosterone. But essentially BPS is doing the same thing. And in fact, it might even be worse because it stays around longer in our bodies. But essentially these chemicals are lowering testosterone. They're lowering sperm quality, sperm morphology, the shape of the sperm. Mm-hmm. They're lowering the quantity of sperm that men are producing. So there's studies in adolescents showing that healthy young adolescents with the highest level of BPA, for every log increase of BPA, now that's a lot. A log increase is a lot. But for every log increase in BPA, there was almost a 50% reduction in testosterone. which is very significant. That's a lot. Again, it is a log increase. It's not just a little bit, it's a lot. But I think you get the picture here, and that is that you're seeing a dose-dependent effect here, right? And that always strengthens the data. There's also studies with adult men showing, again, bisphenol A is associated with lower testosterone levels. At the end of the day, that's obviously like a correlation data. You're saying, well, higher levels of bisphenol A is associated with lower testosterone. We don't really know if that's causing it, right? Maybe they're just all the sort of packaged foods and stuff that people are eating are, the chemical BPA is leached into that. And so you're getting an association when it's really the packaged foods and all that. And so you can't ignore that fact that, plastics, and when you're eating these like processed foods, they are packaged in plastic, and that stuff does leach into your food, particularly if the food is hot or acidic or fatty. That will cause the leaching of it even more. But there are animal studies that have now shown causation. So you can then give, for example, rodents, male rodent mice, high levels of BPA, and yes, it decreases testosterone. It does the same thing with the sperm quality, the sperm quantity, like it goes down as well. And so there's a sort of causation that's established when you look at the totality of evidence. And then we have mechanisms. So I mentioned that the BPA and BPS, these are xenoestrogens. They're binding to the estrogen receptor. They're also binding to the androgen receptor that affects testosterone. Well, they also affect the aromatase enzyme as well. And so you're just getting all these combining factors here showing that essentially these plastic-associated chemicals are dropping testosterone. I mean, I think it's pretty, at this point, just looking at the totality of evidence, it's pretty obvious that they are affecting our hormones.
Well, we'll get into the plastics more as we go on, but it occurs to me that there's an interesting question to ask here, because as you might know, one of the things we've explored on the show is cultural and political changes that have been happening in society for decades now. And I guess the obvious question is like, what would we expect to see in a society in which men's testosterone was dropping in this way? Like, what are some of the ways that might manifest itself?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different health consequences of having lower testosterone. Obviously, one that people think of right out the gate is, lower libradox, sex drive, right? Like that's something that's affected. Cardiovascular disease is another one that's also like bone health, brain, like your mental health as well. I mean, these are all connected. Energy, right? Lower energy. So yeah, I mean, there are downstream consequences to having lower testosterone. Everything from the brain to cardiovascular health to sex drive, which is also very fundamental.
But
right?
Is it also, what I'm getting at is something else, which is also, is it likely to be something that affects the way you view the world, the way you perceive politics or whatever, everything?
I mean, that's not really my area of expertise, but just sort of if I were to speculate, I think that hormones very much affect the way we see the world. They affect the way we feel. They affect our mood. I mean, those things all affect our view on things, right? I mean, if we're feeling anxious, I mean, low testosterone does cause anxiety. If we're feeling anxious all the time, that's going to affect our view, our view and outlook on a variety of different topics, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in that. You could talk to a psychologist or something, but it seems pretty obvious to me that it would affect, people's viewpoints, just knowing that it's pretty fundamental to brain function. But yeah, back to the chemicals, like I talked about BPA and BPS, and those aren't the only ones that are affecting testosterone. It's just one of a barrage of chemicals that we're ingesting, on a daily basis. Another really important one is phthalates. Have you guys heard of phthalates?
No.
So phthalates are something that are they're found in a lot of plastics. They're added to like PVC piping to soften them a little bit. So they're obviously in the pipes that our tap water is running through. And this is global. I mean, it's not just in the United States. They're in a variety of, food packaging items as well, but they're also in personal hygiene products. So they're in shampoos, shaving cream, lotion, makeup, hair products. Just, women are definitely consuming a lot of these through their hygiene products, but men as well. And they're disguised under the word parfum or fragrance are the two things that it's a proprietary sort of blend of things. And phthalates will be in there to sort of extend the half-life of the fragrance, like to make it smell good for a longer period of time. Well, phthalates disrupt testosterone on multiple levels. One, in the testes. So they actually directly, I talked about the androgen receptor with BPA. Well, phthalates are directly disrupting testosterone production in the testes, and they're affecting, the hypothalamic, so the HPG axis, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. This is the axis that's regulating our hormone production. They're affecting that as well. And phthalates are also associated with lower testosterone at like every stage of life. It's really important for development that you're having, normal testosterone. And women that are pregnant that have high phthalate levels, for whatever reason, either they're consuming it through their water, or the phthalates could be coming from their personal hygiene products. But essentially, it's really important to realize that pregnant women that have high phthalate levels are dramatically more likely to have sons that have a variety of different sexual development problems. So for one, they have undescended testicles. So these are, the testicles they don't drop down like they're supposed to. This is a big problem. It causes fertility issues later in life, but a big thing it does is it's probably the number one factor that plays a role in testicular cancer in like young adults,
Wow.
Young adult males. Undescended testicles, the biggest factor that plays a role in testicular cancer. So that's more likely to happen. Hypospadia, which is basically the slit on the urethra on the penis is like further back. And so that's also disrupted. And then the anogenital distance, the distance from the anus to the penis is like smaller. All these things affect fertility. They affect testosterone. I mean, they're again affecting testicular cancer. So very, very important. This all comes down to phthalates. But even later in life, again, the phthalates are associated with lower testosterone in adolescents. And also there's very, very large studies. These are nutritional and health surveys that are done in the United States. They're called the NHANES studies. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people and participants in these studies. Men with higher level of phthalates have much lower levels of testosterone. So again, we're seeing this trend of these chemicals that are put into plastic. They're put into our personal hygiene products, and they're affecting hormone levels. And so I think it's a recurring trend. There's other environmental factors as well that are affecting testosterone. I think some of the glyphosate, is known to as well. I don't know that literature as well, but the plastic chemicals, I think, they're endocrine disruptors. They're fundamentally affecting hormones. It's pretty obvious to me that is a culprit in the declining testosterone levels and also affecting just basically hormones, right? Estrogen